Good morning, guys, and welcome to Unique Not Different with me, Shamla. Today, I have Laurissa Pena, who is an attorney at law and a member of the Judicial Council for the Caribbean Court of Justice. Laurissa is part of the the Human Rights Committee has recently embarked on the disability legislation project, and she's here to talk about this project that is happening. It's an initiative that so would support members of the disabled community to have laws enacted in Trinidad and Tobago. So, good morning, Laurissa. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, Shamla. Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. So, Laurissa, can you tell us a little bit about, the genesis behind the disability legislation project?
Sure. So this is an initiative of the Human Rights Committee of the Law Association. This project was approved in 2022, and a working group was established to ensure that nothing about us without us. So it aims at engaging the disabled community to get their feedback on what type of legislation, what type of accommodations are needed in legislation so that they can have an equal playing field, that they can be a productive member of society and participate in society in all different spheres.
So, in terms of the Law Association of Trinidad and Tobago, right? They have a human rights committee. How is it tied in to the whole initiative and the goal of this initiative?
Okay, so essentially, this is a working group, and it is a subcommittee of the Human Rights Committee. So we have a major Human Rights Committee and several subcommittees, and this is one of the subcommittees that is focused on raising awareness for disability rights and enacting legislation that addresses disability rights and engages the community.
So I know that various groups and individuals have been clamoring for this legislation, right? So how, in terms of the I guess the process to get this enactment, right? Obviously to government and so on. How is this different in terms of the process to get, the actual enactment of the legislation?
Okay, so right now we have an independent senator also forming part of the working group, and we do hope to, Mr. Paul Richards, and we do hope to bring it to the forefront by raising awareness. So we have several different initiatives that we're doing. The first one is public service announcements. There is a draft legislation. We have made comments on it. And the third aspect is to engage the community. So this is a very important aspect. So we have two events coming up. The first one is on the 25th of November, 2023 from 2 to 5 at Naparima Girls High School Auditorium, where we're engaging the community to find out what needs to be done to address, to include in the legislation so that persons with disabilities could have their rights protected, and for us to better understand the issues facing persons with disabilities.
So, right, and who makes up this committee?
Okay, so if I just may backtrack a little bit, there's the one event on the 25th of November and another one on the 2nd of December at Hillview, same 2 to 5. So we're inviting persons with disabilities to come out and support and share their stories, share their challenges so that it can be addressed. So this committee has several lawyers and persons from the public as well. So laypersons, so an independent senator, several attorneys, so myself, Ria Mohammed Davidson, Elena De Silva, the attorneys that form part of the committee, as well as, Paul Richards, and a number of other persons. It's a working group.
Right. And so given I guess you're the subject matter expert as an attorney, right? And well, I presume, right? And so we have signed the Human Rights Convention. We have signed it, right?
Yeah.
But I remember talking to a human rights attorney, and we were discussing in terms of the difference between signing and not having a legislation. So now having a legislation, what would be, just for public knowledge, what would be the difference between now just human rights, signature, right, as opposed to being legislated and having a legislation for persons with disability in Trinidad and Tobago?
Thank you, Shamla. That's a very important question. So we have signed on to the treaty and we've ratified the treaty. The treaty is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We've ratified it in 2015. And right now, what we are working on is getting national legislation. The reason being is because Trinidad and Tobago is a dualist state. And essentially, what that means is that the executive can sign on to treaties and ratify it, but we need an act of parliament to bring it to have binding effect for persons to actually access these rights. So that is the difference between ratifying the treaty and incorporating legislation that actually deals with these rights so that persons with these disabilities can have redress and access the rights set out in the legislation.
So in terms of timeline, what is the timeline in terms of, you started it was enacted in 2022, the committee, and well, the project itself, but where do you see this timeline going in terms of actually getting it into Parliament for persons to work on legislation?
Okay, so this is we've signed on and ratified to the treaty since 2015. In 2022, we formed the working group, and it's very difficult to say a specific timeline because it's not something that the working group itself can do. We are raising the awareness, we're providing our feedback, and at the end of the day, it's up to Parliament to pass it. So we're doing what we can do on our end to raise the awareness and to provide our comments to the draft legislation. But what I can say is we also have a national policy, right? So I know this area is rising and increasing prominence in our sphere, our political sphere, and our legal sphere. And actually, the treaty is one of the treaties signed in the 21st century, one of the only treaties signed in the 21st century. So that goes to say that this issue is an issue that has always been on our books, but it is rising in importance and people are becoming aware of the challenges. So to answer your question, we don't have a specific timeline because it's not in our control, but we are taking the steps that we need to take in order to raise awareness and provide our comment.
I think I was talking about your timelines in terms of getting this project completed.
Yeah, so well, we have completed feedback already. We have our comments completed already, and we are. So it's a short term, more of a short term project than a long term. So that's what we're working with.
So I read that it focuses on persons also outside the disabled community, right? Can you tell us a little bit about who this project will, impact apart from persons with disabilities?
Well, legislation dealing with persons with disabilities affects the whole society, essentially, right? Because this is an issue that we have to address as a civilized society with proper respect for the rights and freedoms of all persons. So it affects the whole society. And essentially, this issue, they say that at some points in our lives, different persons may actually experience a disability as they age. And actually, there is a study done that says that by 2050, 28.2% of persons will have some form of disability, and that is a quota of the population. And Trinidad and Tobago has at least 4% persons living with disabilities. So they have the disabled persons, but it is an issue that affects all of us. It is an issue that shapes society.
Awesome. So just to close, can you just reiterate the two public engagements and also the importance of legislation, just to close up?
Sure. So the two public engagements is the 25th of November, this Saturday, Naparima Girls High School. This Saturday, Naparima Girls High School, 2 to 5, and then December 2nd, Hillview, 2 to 5. It is very important at this stage to address the issue of disability legislation to raise awareness, because at some point it is not an issue of us and them. We need to address the othering. We need to have on our law books laws that respect these persons and respect the rights of these persons and encourage equal participation. It's no longer acceptable to have persons struggling to access the courts. I think there was a case where, this disabled person had a case in the courts and they couldn't, he raised the issue, he couldn't even get to the courtroom. There were barriers and, things were put in place to address this, but it just shows that how much persons may take certain positions for granted, and it is important that we address it to address the system of othering that may take place in society, and also to increase the prominence and allow persons with disabilities to have equal participation in society. A lot of our laws that stand in our books right now, they use terms that may not be addressing the needs. So, for instance, our Immigration Act, they prohibit persons that are deemed imbeciles as a prohibited class from entering our country, and there's a lacuna in the law. There isn't any legislation that particularly and holistically addresses this issue. We have the Equal Opportunity Act, but there is still a lacuna. There is the Defense of Unjustifiable Hardship. And we have the Education Act that seems to have special schools, but they're still not fully addressing all of the needs of this community to make sure that they can adequately participate in society. And this will benefit the whole society.
The whole society. Laurissa, I want to say thank you so much. We are out of time, but thank you so much for coming and sharing this information. And please, I'm sure this is not, the consultation is not just for persons or the community of persons with disabilities, but all persons. As she said, it will impact society as a whole. And guys, with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for tuning in to this week's segment of Unique and Different. As I always say, be good, do good. Bye, guys. Thanks, Laurissa.
Bye. Thank you.